Hello, beautiful soul. Welcome to my channel. My name is Joanna. If this is your first time here, thank you so much for being here. I hope whatever I share with you is going to be useful. My aim is to share with you information that's going to help you make sense out of whatever it is that's going on in your life. But especially when it comes to the process of awakening and waking up. So I hope whatever I have here for you makes sense to you, because at the end of the day, when the mind can make sense of things, it makes us feel a little bit more relaxed. It makes us feel a little bit safer, a little bit more in control. So that's what I have for you today. If you like what you see, I would love for you to subscribe to the channel. It helps the channel to share, to comment, share with a friend or two if you feel that they could use this information. For those of you who are returning, thank you so much for coming back. Again, without you, I wouldn't do this. And I, for the most part, absolutely love what I do. The only time I don't love what I do is when I question myself, and I question myself insatiably. Is that the right word? Right now. And that's because we're going through a massive upgrade, apparently, according to the field. And when I say according to the field, I am referring to essentially source, okay? But at the end of the day, what I share with you, I can't prove it. The only way I know that it is quote unquote real is when I hear and see you saying, "Oh my God, Joanna, I feel exactly the same way." And there are moments like right now, and they are probably your moments too, when we go through a massive consciousness upgrade. What we are essentially going through is akin to what the field called is mental surgery. So we are in the process of going through a massive vibrational upgrade, which means we as human beings are beginning to vibrate at a slightly heightened level. And that has an effect on our programming. And I hear the word, it has a coercive effect on our programming. I feel what the field is trying to say with these words is when we go through an amplification of our own energetic field, our dormant DNA codes come online, and with that comes the awareness or new knowledge of information, which often is more than what we are used to, and it's also often something we don't understand. So when we don't understand something, we often question it. And right now we are in this massive energetic shift where we have a lot more, especially if you're sensitive, we have a lot more access to the universal library. Let's use that analogy. Library meaning information. We have this heightened awareness or cognition of information that we are not used to. And that can feel, it can feel very overwhelming, like it is right now for me. It can also feel frightening, because the whole idea of how do I know what I know? Think of it this way. You're walking around and all of a sudden you are struck with this awareness that you know something. And it's just so palatable. It didn't come from your mind. Nobody said it to you. You didn't read it in a book. You're just walking around doing your thing, and all of a sudden, boom, it's like a flash of information that's presented to you, and it's not in your head, it's in your body. And that can feel, it literally feels like a flash of information, and it comes to you from all different angles. It's like a dump of knowledge or dump of information that bypasses the rational ego and the linear mind, and it's just dumped into your field. And all of a sudden you have this awareness that you know something, but you don't know how you know it. And because you don't know how you know it, you begin to question, is it true? So this is what I'm experiencing right now, and it's heightened a lot. And if I am experiencing this, I am pretty sure you are experiencing this, or you will shortly be experiencing this amplified. And I remember about 2 years ago or so, I was walking somewhere again on the street. I think I was getting my nails done. And I remember having this dump of awareness dumped onto me. And the awareness was that in a very short order, a lot of people are going to be reaching out to people like me because they will feel like they're going crazy. And the regular or traditional way of dealing with it is not going to cut it. And I feel like I am in this right now, and I've gone through it many times. This time around, it feels stronger for whatever reason, but I've said for the last 10 months that 2025 is going to be a very pivotal year, and it sure is marked that way for me. Nothing bad, but a lot of internal changes. But anyway, so when I got this dump of information that a lot of people are going to be reaching out to someone like me who has apparently access to knowledge. I'm no different than you. Everyone has access to it. I just happen to be more adept at it, I guess, if I can use that analogy. I've done a lot of clearing on myself, and I've done it for many other lifetimes. So I seem to have awareness of things that other people don't have awareness of. And because of that, I can help people make sense out of what's going on or what it is that they don't understand or what they're experiencing. So right now, we're going through this massive shift, and a lot of people are likely walking around thinking, scratching their heads and asking themselves the proverbial question, am I going crazy? If you're asking yourself that question, chances are you are not going crazy. But I will attest to you that yes, it feels like you're going crazy. It literally feels like you're losing your mind. How do I know what I know? How do I know if what I know is correct? It can be very overwhelming. So my job, if you will, is to help you make sense of what's happening so that you can, in your conscious awareness, go, okay, I can relax. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm not making shit up. This is just part of this thing called higher consciousness. It's part of waking up. And I suspect if you're watching shows like this or channels like this, you are on a conscious quest to wake up. What does it mean to wake up? To wake up to the reality of who we really are, beyond the human costume, beyond the ideas, beyond the feelings, and so on and so forth. And this waking up process is a massive, massive undertaking because it literally obliterates the old ways. When we begin to wake up, we begin to see things clearly, much differently. And because we have access to this clarity and being able to see from a higher perspective, we see things from a different perspective and we make changes accordingly. Okay. Obviously, when you have a bigger perspective on something, it's a lot easier to make a choice than if your perspective is very, very limited, right? Because when your perspective is very limited, you have limited amount of options. When the perspective is much broader and much greater, there's a lot more options. So we are, as humanity, actually in a process of waking up to having more options. And it's not that these options were not available to us. It's just we couldn't perceive these options because of our limited way of seeing and thinking. And now, as our old programming begins to fall, we begin to see much more of what truly is, not what we were taught is, which is two different things. So oftentimes what we are taught is, there is a lot more beyond what we are taught. It's called conditioning. So we could say it differently. We are in the process of waking up from our limited conditioning. We are becoming consciously aware of our limited programming. And because we become consciously aware of this programming, we can consciously shift these programmings into ones that are far less limited. And that in itself is a choice. When we begin to remember that we are not our program, when we begin to remember that we are not a condition, when we begin to remember that we are not our thoughts, we can change our thoughts. We can change our programming. We can change our conditioning. So to wake up really means to wake up from the illusion of what is in our 3D world. Now, when I say illusion, that doesn't mean that the illusion that we are experiencing as 3D is not valid. Oh, it is valid. It is very, very real, but it is an illusion. So I feel like I want to explain a little bit more about this illusion. And I'm sure if you watch channels like this, you kind of sort of know what I'm talking about. I'm literally just channeling right now information. So when we say illusion, we simply mean this. You and I are an embodied soul. In other words, we are souls having an embodied experience. This embodied experience is in 3D vibration or 3D density, and it is called a human being. And we identify as this human being, so we think that we are the human being. No, we are a soul having a human being experience. So yes, we are experiencing being a human, but we are also an unlimited being, both at the same time. In other words, we are a paradox. We are both unlimited and we are also limited by having an experience that is of limited nature and a very dense vibration. So from that perspective, it is very, very real. And the 3D experience has certain conditions attached to it. For one of the conditions of having human experience is to have an ego. Because to have an experience from a human's perspective, you have to have an ego. Ego is not a bad thing. It's not something that has to be gotten rid of. It's not something that has to be killed or pushed away. Ego is a tool for our soul's experience. But when we begin to identify solely as the ego, we begin to identify with our limitation. So yes, we do have limitations. We have a physical body. We don't have wings. We don't have fly. We can't fly unless we take an airplane. But the type of limitations I'm talking about is the conditioned limitations that tell us we cannot heal ourselves. We are not valuable. We are not worthy. We have to be this or that to be loved. And there is literally a gazillion different conditions that we human identify with. But we are not these conditions. And because we are not these conditions, we can change our conditions. We can change how we identify. But the first key is to recognize that we identify as our condition, but our condition is not who we are. That's a big one. Okay. So is it disidentifying with the ego? Well, we could say that it is no longer identifying as the ego, but rather a soul having an experience that includes an ego. Okay? When you have that awareness, when you have that realization, when you have the remembering that you are a soul having a human experience, you automatically, it's like you're taking your power back. And I'm trying to ask the question, help me understand, what does that mean? Here's why. When we identify with the ego, and ego, it's in its very nature structured as a limitation, we begin to identify with our limitation, which limits our power. Okay. Doesn't mean that we are not powerful. It means that by identifying with our limitation, we don't take full advantage of the power that we have. Okay. On the other hand, when we begin to disidentify with our limitations, it's like we're taking our power back. We are essentially saying, I am not my limitation. I am not my limitation. And that is, try it. That is very empowering. You could be, let's give an example. I can't think of an example right now. But the idea here is simply, when we begin to disidentify as our limitations, we begin to identify more with our nature, with our true power. Okay. So you know the paradox of being both limited and unlimited at the same time, the paradox? That's the idea of the illusion. So when we begin to disidentify with our ego, when we begin to disidentify with our condition, we begin to identify more with our true power. And that makes us very powerful. Okay. So the whole process of awakening is literally returning back to our power. The word power is kind of sort of cliche, but I to our true essence. Thank you. I'm going to use the word true essence. Okay. So I am recording this at the end of the first week of October. The last video I released was at the beginning of October, and I said that October is going to change you, completely change you. And I specifically remember saying the first 2 weeks in October, you might really feel off. So welcome to October week 2. I mean, if you're listening to it later, maybe I'm sure things will resonate with you. But if you're listening to this right now, somewhere in the middle of October, here are some of the things that you will likely be going through. So as I said earlier, we are going collectively and individually through what is called a mental surgery, which is essentially collapse of old timelines and powerful upgrades. And just think of the idea of going for surgery, any kind of surgery. The surgery takes time. Healing after surgery takes time. In other words, it's a process. Generally, when we have a physical surgery, it's to either remove something or to fix something that's broken. Okay. So I am not saying that we are undergoing mental surgery because we are broken. No, I'm not saying that, because we are not broken. Nor am I saying that we are undergoing mental surgery because something has to be removed. But mental surgery, in a sense that our mental energy, our mental system is being decluttered. Think of it this way. When you decide to declutter your house, well, first and foremost, you have to see what the clutter is, recognize the clutter, and start the process of decluttering. Okay, and that takes time. You look into drawers, you look into cabinets, you look into places you haven't looked before, and you are getting rid of, if you will, things that you no longer need. Why? Well, think of the idea of being in a very cluttered house. It feels very stifling. It feels uncomfortable. It obviously does not feel spacious. And when you have a lot of clutter in the house, it's hard to find things, number one. But number two, there's no room for new things to arrive, because it doesn't matter what you put on top of clutter, you're not even going to see it because there's too much clutter. And in order for us to see things more clearly, and these are all metaphors, we first have to declutter our mind. And we are going to, so this mental surgery is decluttering of our minds. And this is how it will likely show up for you. For me, it's showing up as totally questioning myself. I mean, I've been doing this type of work for almost 25 years. You'd think that I would stop questioning myself. Nope. Must be stubborn. Well, I am a Taurus after all. But it's amplified. And, I always say that clearing up the old conditioning from our minds takes time. Not only does it take time, it's a process. It takes lifetimes. And apparently, according to the field, we have been preparing for this monumental shift. We've been preparing for it for lifetimes. So if you are here watching this, and you are cognizant of the fact that we are collectively going through a massive shift of consciousness, you are here to help with that process, and you have been preparing for this for many lifetimes. This is what I'm getting from the field. And that's because apparently it takes tremendous effort to shift consciousness of, what is it? We have 6 or 8 billion people. That's a lot of consciousness shift. Now, I don't necessarily feel we have to shift 8 billion people's consciousness in order for our world to be better. I don't feel that's the case. But I feel eventually what's going to happen is the entire consciousness of humanity is going to shift. And that takes a long time. Because shift doesn't just happen automatically. I mean, it can in rare cases. But what I'm getting is, in order for shift to take place, we have to be open to shifts. If we are not open, the universe is not going to force anything on us. Generally, that's not how it works. It has to be invited. It has to be willingly, is what I'm getting. So we are here willingly in this process. I know what you're saying. Willingly? No, I didn't sign up for this. Are you crazy? I know, because I say the same things a lot. And sometimes I say, what the hell was I thinking? Well, here's the thing. I wasn't thinking with my human brain. I was seeing from my soul's perspective. And my soul's perspective and your soul's perspective is wide open. To your soul's perspective, it's not a game as, it's frivolous, but it is like a virtual reality. Literally, it's a virtual reality. That's not to minimize what's going on in the world. Absolutely not. Because if you've ever had VR glasses on and you experience virtual reality, you're full on in the experience. Like you're it, right? So that's the illusion I was talking about earlier. So here's some of the things that you might still be going through or are likely to go through over the next little while. Irritation, agitation, or discomfort. The feeling I have is like, I just want to get out of my skin. Like, I just want to jump out of my skin, but I can't. So I tuned into like, why do I want to just jump out of my skin? And the first thing that came to me is because it feels dense. Because the physical body is very dense. To occupy physical body, we naturally have to almost like reduce the level of our vibration, which makes sense. Okay. So that's why it's always so important to ground our energy to the body. So a part of me wants to jump out of my skin, but I know I can't, nor do I want to, because I don't want to be walking around discombobulated, not in my body. But it's an uncomfortable feeling, and I would like to kind of jump out of my body, not be in my body, because it's so dense. Brain fog, scattered thoughts. The whole scattered thought idea might actually feel very amplified. And it's kind of along the lines of, I know what I want, but I don't know how to go about it. Or I don't know what I want, or what's wrong with me. is there something wrong with it? Just your thoughts being kind of sort of all over the place and not making sense. And you're looking at yourself going, what's wrong with me? It's that kind of a feeling. It's very bizarre. It's a very discombobulated feeling. Resistance to doing, creating, or being out there, putting yourself out there. Yes, I have this sign too. And it's basically, if I could just curl up in a ball and just wake up whenever this is over, I would be totally fine with this. But I know that's not practical. But there is this resistance to, like, even this video. I had resistance to doing it, and I just thought, fuck it, pardon me. I'm just going to be literally tell you how I feel as raw as it is. And if it makes sense, great. If it doesn't make sense, turn it off and move on. No problem there. Strong desire to clean, declutter, or reset environment. This is interesting because I actually had a dream, and I dream every single night. I had a dream last night that I had an exchange with some being, which was interesting because I've never seen a being like that before in my dream. So I knew it was not just a dream. But right after that, when we had the exchange of energy, I was decluttering. I was cleaning some space. So even in my mind, even in my dreams, pardon me, there is this feeling of wanting to clean. So you might feel like you want to declutter, a strong desire to clean. And if that's the case, by all means, declutter. Emotional waves: tears, frustration, laughter, release, and anger. And tears, frustration, laughter, release, and anger, that combination is pretty much hourly for me right now. It's like, it feels like I'm coming and going and coming and going. Again, it's a space where it's like, Joanna, what's wrong with me? Now, when I ask that question, I know better because I've gone through this so many times before, but this time it's amplified. So if you're feeling like you're pissed off, or the next minute you want to cry, and then you're frustrated, you don't even have no idea why you're frustrated. Yes, it might feel like you're going nuts. So trust me, 99.99%, this is just all part of the process. Okay. Questioning what's wrong with me, or self-doubt loops. Yes, I'll be the first one to tell you. Not only for me am I questioning what's wrong with me. Actually, I don't question what's wrong with me anymore. I used to. My biggest question is always, am I using my mind? Am I making shit up? Is this even real? And, every time I ask that question, I see an image of my higher self rolling her eyes, and she says, here we go again, Joanna. Just continue on the path. So if you're having these questions come into your mind and you're doubting yourself, you know the saying, that too shall pass. Okay, the old ways of doing things are gone. This is one of the messages that came to me. The old way of doing things are gone. Things that used to work, whether it's in your relationship or whether at work, or things that used to work, they no longer work. Like the way, for me, for example, when I show up in my own business, the way I used to do things, it's not working anymore. And I can keep doing the same thing over and over again. It's just not working anymore because the vibration is different. And the frustrating part is that I know the old ways are not working, but I don't know what the new way is yet. So this weird space in between. Okay. Also, what I was perceiving that if you're watching this, you're likely someone who's fairly sensitive. Your field of view is becoming amplified, which means you are likely to have clearer vision and being able to see further. And it was interesting because the way it was presented to me is I was able to see ahead of what was in front of me. But it wasn't like it. How do I want to say it? It wasn't like a prediction. It was more a sense of knowing of where things are heading. Now, whether they actually end up where I see Whether things actually end up where I see ultimately, I don't know, because every single one of us has the opportunity to change things. But it's that being able to see ahead what might be taking place. And you might be experiencing this knowing, this awareness of things that you feel you see are going to happen. And you don't know how you know that, and you actually don't know if you're right. So there's a lot of discerning that has to take place. And I'm always very careful, because whenever I perceive things in the future, and whenever I work with the field, which is always, my intention is always, first and foremost, whatever is most important and needed for my client or whoever I'm talking to, that is in his or her highest interest, that is the only information that wants to move through me, that I want to move through me. Anything other than that, not interested. So, but what I was going to say is that usually when I see information presented to me from the future, I try not to focus on it, because I know that future can be changed, but it is often telling where the energy is heading. Okay, so if you start seeing things and they feel like these are things from the future, just know that very few things are a given. Yes, energies, if continued to be focused in a certain direction, they will likely turn out in a certain way. But always remember that we can change, we can make different choices, and outcomes can also change depending on the choices we are making. So if you are receiving information from the future, just be mindful and use a lot of discernment. I just feel like it's really important for me to say this. Okay. What else? Collapsing of all timelines. And powerful upgrades. We talk about that. You might also be experiencing feelings of lack. I actually have a message on this. I pulled 3 cards for us to focus on, and that's one of them. Not to focus on lack, but actually to focus on the positives. But I'll talk about that in a moment. The feeling that something is missing, but you don't know what it is. Like there's something missing, but you don't know what it is. And seemingly there's nothing missing in your life. I mean, you may want a little of money, you may want to go on vacation, but this is different. This is like something is missing, but you don't know what it is. It's a very strange feeling. All I would say on that is, actually, can I get more information on that? It's not, here's where I'm getting. We are all in a space of clearing. What you feel is missing is not that it's missing, it's that you were not conscious of having access to it. And as we become more conscious, we will begin to have more access to things that we haven't had access to before because of our limited perceptions. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Okay. So this feeling of something is missing, but you don't know what it is. It's not that something is missing. It's like the field is opening up to you. That's how it wants to come through me. I don't know if it makes sense logically, but that's how it wants to come and move through me. It's the field is making itself more available to you, and to you, it's thank you. Okay. What's missing? It's the old sense of rigidity. Think of it this way: when we are used to certain ways, we rely on those ways. And then when we let that go, all of a sudden we create this opening. And this opening can feel like something is missing. But what actually is missing is the old ways of how we used to relate, but we don't relate anymore. So it's actually a really good thing, because what you are perceiving, what you are perceiving is you're actually perceiving more room. You're perceiving energetically more room. So think of yourself as a energetic field that's stretching. Okay. Feeling like you're not doing something right, or you're supposed to do something, but again, you don't know what it is. It's all part of this mental fog. Um, the other thing I wanted to bring up is no, okay. So part of this waking up process comes with a lot of gifts, inherent gifts that we have, but we haven't had access to it. One of those gifts is knowing things before they happen. And again, you might think it's like a prediction. I don't want to use the word prediction because the word prediction feels very rigid to me, but it is an amplified way of knowing things before they happen. And, it's a very interesting area because you can't prove it, right? So you have to be very discerning. You have to be very discerning. But knowing things before they happen, especially when you start seeing things in your life that validate this to you, then you begin to trust it. And then that trust builds and you begin to trust what you are seeing in the field. And apparently what I was receiving when I tuned in is that the higher we vibrate, the higher vibratory that we are as beings, the more we can perceive what's out there. Now that makes perfect sense to me because the higher we vibrate, the less restricted we are with our limitations. So in other words, the less limited we are, the higher perception we have, the wider perception. So that means that we can see more. That makes perfect sense. You might, however, feel like you have a system overload. Too much information too fast. In fact, so much in your mind that you don't know what to do with it all. When I was sitting here meditating before I turned on the camera, I had this dump of information, and the way it showed up for me visually, because I'm a visual person, is this massive amounts of books in my vibrational field. And so this vast knowledge, and I have no idea what it is, nor what to do with it. And it's just, the brain wants to grab onto it. It wants to understand, but it just feels like it's in my field. I know it's there, but I don't know what it is, and I don't know what to do with it all. It's that kind of feeling. The best way that I can describe it. Now, the logical mind of mine goes, well, Joanna, how do you know you're not making this up? I don't know. I don't know. That's the whole point. I don't know. But I've relied on these visions for the last 20, 25 years, and I've been able to incorporate these visions with everything that I do. And it seems that these visions are making sense to people, and they're helping people. So the only thing I can go on is that I've developed trust in the visions that I've been receiving for the last 25 years. So I can pretty much say with 99% certainty that I'm not making it up. But there is still that part of me that doubts and says, well, Joanna, what if you make things up? What if you're making things up? I will not know until I actually have this information come to me, and then it's going to be moved through me for you. That's the best way that I can describe it. It's like, think of it this way. It's like having access to a vast library, but you don't know what book you need and you don't know what it's for. It's that kind of a feeling. So it can feel very overwhelming. This is the best advice I can give you. Try not to overanalyze it. And I know it's so hard because the mind needs to analyze, because when the mind analyzes, it tries to make sense of things. When the mind makes sense of things, it controls it. It tries to control it, and when it controls it, it feels safe. So your ego will always try to understand things, but many of these things cannot be understood with our linear logical mind. It's not how it works. Okay, there are many things that people are experiencing that cannot be logically explained. Like, for example, near-death experiences is a good one. Thousands and hundreds of thousands of people have experienced pretty much the same thing, but science cannot make sense of it, right? Like, what do you mean you go somewhere? You're dead. So try not to make sense of everything. Because when this information is meant for you to be understood, it'll come like this. It'll just come. It'll just come to you. Okay? But it may feel a little bit overwhelming. All right. So I pulled 3 cards and I said, okay, universe, tell us what will be best that we focus on right now. We have the card of new beginnings. So as the card suggests, we are in a process of new, which means in order for new to be, old has to go. So you don't need me to share with you that the world is going through a lot of mess right now, and there's a lot of endings and beginnings, both individually and collectively. Okay? But the message is, what do we focus on? Focus on new ways of doing things. This is focusing on new ways of doing things, new ideas, new concepts. Joanna, give a realistic example. Let's say you have a business, okay? And the way you've been doing things, they're just not working. And you keep doing them the same old way, but they're not working. So if you keep doing things and they're not giving you the results that you need, and you keep doing it over and over again, then maybe it's time to look at what you're doing and ask yourself the question, what can I do differently? What can I do better? What kind of restrictions could I let go of? This is new beginnings in terms of new ideas, new concepts, new forms, so that we can start doing things in new ways. Okay? That's the first message. The second message is blessings. So this is what we're to focus on. So obviously the message is focus on your blessings. But there are a lot of people in the world that would be extremely difficult to focus on their blessings because they're going through so much chaos. Okay? However, if you are not in that situation, if you are blessed to be in a home or in a space or in a country where there is no bombs, outside of your door, then you probably have a lot to be grateful for. Okay. It doesn't mean we ignore what's going on. It doesn't mean we ignore the negativity. It doesn't mean we ignore the denser energy, but don't dwell on it. So the message is this: focus on the positives. If you can, of course. And I would say majority of you listening to this can, okay? Don't discount or ignore the negatives. And I'm saying negatives in quotation marks because we think of negatives as something we don't like. But something that we don't like doesn't mean is actually not good for us, because it can be. Like for example, if you're getting your tooth drilled, you may not like it, but actually what's happening is something positive. You're getting your teeth fixed. You get the picture, right? So focus on positives, focus on your blessings. Don't ignore the other, but don't dwell in it. Okay? Again, I don't have to say this to you guys. You guys know. The more we focus on positive, the more we focus on love, the more we spread that energy. That doesn't mean we ignore what's going on. It doesn't mean we ignore human pain. It doesn't mean we ignore human suffering. But let's not add to it, because that's not going to help. Okay. Number 3, this one is called splendor. What actually came to me was the message of don't hold back. Be generous with your energy, but always give from your cup being filled first. So be generous with your energy. Don't overgive. Give from a sense of balance. If filling your cup first and then sharing it with others, it makes often very little sense to give from a space of depletion, because not only are you depleting yourself further, whatever you are doing, whoever you are doing it for, you're not giving them your best. Okay? Some people would say, well, if I'm filling my cup first before anybody else, that makes me selfish. Well, if you're not going to fill your cup, and that's a metaphor, Who will? Are you saying that somebody else should be responsible for filling your own cup? No, we have to fill our own cup. It doesn't mean people don't help us. Please don't get me wrong. That would be stupid for me to say. But, we cannot make other people responsible for our happiness. And we often do. Listen, I've done it. Sometimes I still catch myself doing it. We have to be responsible for our own happiness and our own unhappiness. It doesn't mean that outside circumstances don't add to it. Of course they do, of course. But I think you get the picture. I don't want to belabor on it. But the message here is, don't hold back in giving of yourself, but always give from a space of fullness, not from a space of lack, and not from a space of your own depletion, because that doesn't help you or the other person. Okay, so if you find yourself constantly overworking, overgiving, overspending, over analyzing, the chances are you are compensating for some sort of lack that you think you have. Okay, because I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm getting the word overgiving. For those of you who have a tendency to overgive, and you would know. But can you give me an example of overgiving, please? Let's say you constantly say yes because you're used to being a pleaser, and oftentimes you say yes when your body really is like, and you ignore your body, you do this, whatever it is that you're going to do because you feel bad, or because you don't want people to reject you, or because you don't want people to judge you, or because whatever. If that's what happens for a prolonged period of time, what you are doing is you are saying no to yourself and yes to the environment, which means you are making your environment priority and not you. Okay. So if you don't make yourself a priority, doesn't mean you don't have other priorities, but if you don't make yourself a priority, then who's going to take care of you? Other people? Yes, of course, we have other people who help us, but at the end of the day, we have to be responsible for ourselves. I'm not saying you have to make a 5-year-old child responsible for his or her own safety. Of course, I'm not talking about that. Again, the message is for those of you who have a tendency to overgive. If you are constantly overgiving, then you are likely depleted. If you are energetic depleted, you generally will feel it in a certain way. It's going to affect your mood. It's going to affect your ability to fully show up in life. It's going to affect your ability to find joy in your life. It's going to negatively impact you. Okay? We're not saying don't give. No, please give, yes. But give from your fullness, not from your depletion. That's probably one of the bigger messages right now for some reason. So with that said, I hope this is making sense to you. Again, the only way I know that I'm not making this up is when you say, oh my God, Joanna, I thought it was just me. No, it's not just you. And in fact, I checked with your friends and I said, am I going nuts? They're like, no, this is the energy right now. So thank you so much for being here. If you would like to connect with me, there's a link down below. And I am hosting a Peru retreat in November. If you are interested, there's a link down below. And until next time, have yourself a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.